Hey everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. I am so thrilled to have Morgan Garritson, Director of Digital Operations for Persefoni, which is a company that calls itself the platform for climate management. So super interesting stuff. Thank you for coming on, Morgan.
Yes, thank you. It's great to be here, Josh.
So let's start with, you're not a culture professional, but you do culture professionally.
Yeah,
Let's start.
nothing on paper gives me any kind of qualifications for being a culture expert. But I'm just somebody, probably like a lot of your listeners, that just is in love with this idea of culture and love to be kind of part of building it in my company.
Right. So that's great. That's exactly where I want to start. So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are, not being a culture professional, but here you are talking about culture. You said you were a recovering product manager. Is that right?
I did. I came from the program management, product management side of the business. I've been in software and technology for close to 20 years.
Yeah.
My first run in software was not great. I don't think I was ready for it at that time, that age. We might come to that story later. But yeah, I've been on the product side, where I was very in tune with the team and really protective of the team and making really important relationships and energizing those relationships over time. So I've developed this need for inclusion and sort of representation. And so I've carried that with me now. I'm on more of the IT side of the business, but I still managed to carry that over. At Persefoni, I actually somehow they tapped me a couple years ago to run the all hands. So I'm one of the internal faces of the company too. So every couple of weeks, all 300 of us, or as many of us as are available, jump on a call together, talk for an hour about everything that's going on across the industry, across the company, any sort of monumental occasions with our teams. So we have an opportunity to connect every couple of weeks, even though we're spread across 13 different countries.
Yeah.
So to me, that's really important. One of the things I celebrate in that all hands call is, encouraging teams to get together in their locales. So we have, for example, maybe 10 people here in Portland, and we get together every once in a while for drinks and take a photo, and then it goes on the all hands. And so we have this sort of celebration of community, even though we're completely remote.
Yeah.
It's a fun opportunity to get engaged.
Why I think a lot of newly distributed organizations are scrambling to figure out what they should be doing. So what would be the case that you would make to another organization that they should be encouraging their group, like their team, like a team that happens to be, in and around Hamburg or whatever, Hyderabad or whatever it might be, to get together? Why should they do that?
So hard to get the face-to-face connection over Zoom. In a hybrid environment in particular, when some people are in the office and some people are remote, and there's nothing more exclusionary than being the remote person on the hybrid call.
Yeah.
So that experience is kind of crummy. We actually encourage people to just everybody on the call kind of Zoom in on their own device. But separate from that, it's hard to get the real connection from afar, the real in-person connection, and it's available. And our team is so strong and we have so much talent that it's a shame not to get together. And that's kind of how I project my message to the team is get together with these people. You'd be blown away. You don't have to be an extrovert or anything. There's people, if they're an hour away, meet them, get on a train and meet them, have a drink and blow each other's mind.
Yeah.
And the company will pick up the tab.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I find compelling is, of course, getting together with someone that you work closely with in person is really nice. But even more compelling is those that you don't work closely with, right? If they're on a different project team. So that's what I was kind of getting at. You're like, well, why? Right? Like, I don't interact with this person. You're like, well, maybe you could, or like you can learn from somebody. This is a great excuse to connect with somebody that works at your company. You have something in common with.
Absolutely. I mean, whenever we get together, I would say of the 8 or 10 of us here, I'd say none of us work together on a day-to-day basis.
Perfect example.
We have an absolute blast. Everyone was over at my house for a holiday party, and brought the kids, and I mean, it's like a little family.
Mm,
We have obviously a common interest. We work for a company that has, you know, a mission that we all are aligned with. So we already have that in common. So why not, spend some time together getting to know each other in real life? And it's been really helpful. I think it ends up being, giving us a little bit of boost and energy for productivity as well.
yeah, yeah, that's great. So let's get back to your journey. So I think it's very similar to a lot of folks that probably listen, which is they kind of arrived at culture organically or something like that, right? Where you're like, oh my gosh, I actually think this is really important. And they bring it with them, even if they don't have it in their title. When did you start? Like, what was the moment that, or did you have a moment where you were like, oh my gosh, culture is really important. This is something that I think we need to focus on.
Unfortunately, mine is probably a negative experience.
I think
I have
that is
probably
not, I mean, it's
pretty
totally
common.
legit. Yeah, that's pretty common.
I have a long list of great experiences, but one was my second job out of college was um, for a software company, and it was global. I think that I was probably too young for that level of corporate mentality. And I think that honestly, I don't feel like at the time, and things are probably different now. Um, it seemed like around me, maybe it was just the people I was surrounded by, that it felt like a little bit overworked, a little bit underpaid. People were sick a lot or calling in sick a lot. And I felt like I
Right.
was surrounded by B and C players. And it just felt empty. And it felt like
Mm.
this, I don't want to work at a place like this. I want to work at a place that energizes me. And I don't feel like this is where people come to die.
Did you have, I mean, it's early in your career, you didn't have an experience to really compare it to. I mean, a lot of folks will go, oh, my last company was a lot better. This is, not, but you're early in your career. You're like, there's got to be something better. You're not comparing it to anything. Was that the kind of thought?
Yeah, I think I, having brought myself up and the way I did, I was just like, this life was too short. And I just kept poking around until, I kept finding kind of a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger, and making really strategic decisions along the way. One of the choices I made when I moved to the Northwest, maybe 11 years ago, and had a great offer to run marketing, electronic marketing, email marketing at Starbucks, and decided to actually take up some friend of a friend on a coffee date to go see what he had to offer. So he had a little startup he was getting ready to expand, and I met with him for coffee and decided that I'd rather work with this person and his one partner and have the opportunity to just blow up my knowledge, have an impact on culture, be impacted by culture. We had partners that were in Vietnam at the time. I had It was just like a very easy decision. I mean, I had a very sure thing with a
Yeah.
very large corporation, and a
Yep.
very unsure, like jumping off in the deep end type of journey.
Yeah. Did
So
you, I mean, at the beginning of your culture journey, did you know when you were having that crappy experience that was culture, where you're like, what I need better culture? Or was it like, is that like, how did you talk about it?
yeah,
Either.
I think it was culture. I think that, the way I think about culture now, and like how, it's relationships, it's empathy, it's pulling each other up, it is having
Mm,
space for each other to be their entire whole selves.
mm,
And that was limited there. And at that time, again, this is a long time ago. Um, so I mean, I think people moved on from there with like being better people, but I think that the ability for somebody to show up and be exactly who they are, that was missing then. And the further I've gone in my career, the closer I'm getting to that. And the
yeah.
more that I'm sort of trying to inspire that.
Right. Well, now you're in this position of being able to influence that.
Hmm. I
When
hope so.
you so you've been at Persephone for almost 3 years.
Mhm.
When you first showed up, we were like, and I'm gonna also help with culture.
Well, it's funny you say that. One of the questions in my interview, and granted, I knew all three of the founders already. I had worked with them before. So they pulled me over based on what they
Right.
knew.
They knew what you brought.
They knew what they were getting into. But one of the questions I asked was, we're early, this is an early young business. In the future, what company would you like to emulate as far as culture? And I did use the word culture. I said, who do you want to be like that's out there now? And without really any hesitation, one of the founders said, well, Patagonia would probably be the closest. And whether or not that's where we are, like, that was enough for me to say I can align with that. If you would have said something like, any kind of Bitcoin company or any kind of like, hedge fund management company, I probably would have, I don't know if that's the right fit for me.
Yeah.
Not to say those are wrong, it's just for me personally, like the Patagonia alignment made a lot of sense.
Exactly.
So it's your responsibility really going in to make sure and discover that. And I also, when I'm interviewing people for jobs, I also ask them, what are you looking for? And one important question I ask them is, when you get stuck, where do you go to find inspiration?
Whoa.
And I try to understand if we are a fit. And it could be anything, it could be they go for a walk or a hike, or, they go swimming or something. But if they don't feel, if it's like, oh, I go and play a video game, then we may or may not. That doesn't mean the conversation's over or anything, but
I mean, what are you looking to learn from that, right? So I'm going to tell you, I'll go for a run. That's where what is that? How do you, what are you learning from that?
So you have some tool that serves you to go out and sort of clear your mind and find inspiration. And then I would maybe follow up with, okay, well, what kind of things, what are you thinking about on your run? Are you thinking like how to solve a problem, or,
Right.
I don't know. It can kind of go in any direction. It just depends on how the conversation is going.
Interesting. So it's a little, it's not that you're looking for an answer, but it's like, it's a way to kind of direct the conversation and pull it apart. That's so interesting. It's an interesting approach. So Persefoni right now is 300, but you joined when it was quite a bit smaller. What challenges have you found, and what successes when it comes to scaling an organization, a technical or very technical organization? What have you seen and learned from that, and how have you gotten it to, 300, 200, 300, that's a serious number, right? Now you're getting into a serious organization. So
I'll tell you, I think the biggest jump was most likely when we hit about 40, and you'll hear this a lot in startups, that sort of is like the pivotal moment, right? Where you're starting to need to establish some sort of something to rally around. And I think in the beginning, we were all running around doing everything. It was a ton of fun. And then as we started to grow, we said, well, this needs to be able to scale to the next level. And we didn't have like a fully ramp up onboarding experience built before we hit that point. We started building it and have since built a wonderful onboarding experience. I think that's one of the most significant feedback we get from new hires, is that our onboarding experience is great. I'm not biased, but I do think it is good. As part of that, and then as we scaled to so now we're talking about how carbon accounting 101, what tools to use. Our CEO meets with them. There's, sometimes there's a group that starts on a Monday together, like a cohort. It's sort of like more evolved. And then in addition to that, in addition to core values and a mission statement, we've also got what are operating principles. They're simple, they're almost tangible, and they're easy to link back to, and they're like celebrated every single day, all day long. So I can tell you what they are if you want. The first one is deliver customer results. So obviously, we're going nowhere without our customers. So it's like customer delight is still a thing all day long. And the second one, this is probably the one that we leverage the most, insisting on excellence, which means like giving and receiving a ton of really constructive feedback, really candid feedback, and having thin skin that's thick enough to kind of let some stuff come through. Some stuff will bounce off. That's okay. But being able to sort of take in that feedback, convert some of it to action, dispel some of it. We also have, designated channels in our Slack environment that's just strictly for celebrating everybody. So like
Mm,
John did an amazing job on this call today. Everyone should know about it. Or, Jordan did a crush the sales call
yeah,
today. Or
yeah.
lots of spaces and times for people to exchange ideas and feedback and also praise. So I think that helps a lot. The third
Yeah.
one is
Well,
having it. Oh, go ahead.
before you move on, I wanna just acknowledge that feedback piece, because it's this, to me, I have continued to observe more and more that this is a critical failure of many, many North American enterprise organizations. For whatever reason, our American culture, capital C, is averse to conflict. And so when you establish, what I love about that is it becomes, you're saying it's an operating principle. This is something that we've documented. This is something that we've codified, and this is something that we expect. And so you are helping people to get better at this. And I think that's the way you should do any skill, right? When we think about what values or operating principles you want to work on, this is what we expect. Here, we're going to help you get there. But to have this in a particular area that I think the vast majority of I guess maybe what the Western world maybe aren't as quite as adept at, I think is really wonderful. And so if I had to guess, I would say that's probably one of the probably pivot points or most critical levers in your culture, is probably that one.
That one is certainly one of the most impactful. I think, growing into a space where you can kind of let your guard down a little bit and expect, like you said, having expectation for others to do the same.
Mhm.
There's only growth that comes from that.
Yeah.
Like there's just no, there's very few instances where it's received negatively or ignored completely. I mean, that's rare. And that's a choice, and that would reflect on an individual, right? So like, but the company's expectation and the team's expectation is that we are insisting on excellence from everybody. We're all A players. We all want to be A players, at least. We're striving to be,
Yeah.
and that's part of the way there. Like that's part of the journey. So being able to depend on each other to just give me the feedback I need. I want to be better, right? Nobody's just sitting back on their heels and waiting for the day to go by.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, just to be able to document that and say, hey, look, this is one of those things. All right. Thank you for indulging me in that. Number 3, third operating principle.
Third, and this one's probably another one of my favorites because
You only have 4, so you can't just say I have 4 favorites.
It's 4 favorites. Have a bias for action and move fast. So it's not so much don't wait for permission, but it's like, if you have 3 or 4 competing ideas, just pick one and go. And like try to keep moving fast. There isn't time, at least in our business and at our stage of the company, we want to continue to accelerate, right? And advance and innovate quickly. And there's just not time to slow down, have a committee. I mean, we even at 300, we still allow each other to like go fast, break things. No big deal if we fail. We're going to keep moving. I mean, we learn a lot that way. We have our failures, but we definitely rebound. We always come back stronger. I sound like a coach. So I do love that one. That one I get slapped on my hand the most for just stop up-threeing so much. And then the last one is act and invest like an owner. So this is like the idea of, we don't want to have to go and watch your every move. Nobody's interested in doing that at this stage. There's a book, the Netflix founder, is it Reed Hastings?
Mhm.
The No Rules Rules.
Mhm.
And where he's basically saying like, don't get the first class ticket if you don't. I mean, do it if you gotta, but don't do it if you don't have to. If you're not flying to England or something, like basically don't be an a-hole about money and making business decisions. So If you can just kind of continue to have that in the back of your mind, I'm an owner in this company. How am I going to spend my money? How am I going to invest my time? And how am I going to treat people around me? And how do I mean, just like, how do I want to perceive, how do I want to be perceived, and how do I want the company to be perceived?
Yeah.
So they're all easy to link back to. I think the fact that they're short, they're easy to remember. You could pretty much apply any action you have to one of those. And like I said, we have every month on the all hands, we have an award ceremony. So somebody gets nominated for, or awarded for each of those operating principles every month.
Great.
So they're celebrated, and people love it. I mean, it's so wonderful to see people getting acknowledged, particularly people that aren't necessarily customer facing or aren't necessarily like in full view all the time, but their work is essential. So like, I can speak from the IT perspective right now. Like, we have some amazing talent on the IT side, but it's not something you would see from a customer's perspective very often. So just the fact to be recognized internally is so meaningful. And I think continues to bring people, value that they're looking for.
That's amazing. I'm ready to join. So I have to ask, those to what you've just described, you're calling them operating principles. To me, they sound like values. That's what I hope when I create values for an organization, that they're actionable and memorable. It's all the stuff that, and I would say they are, except for you have 4 values as well. How do you, what I'm a little confused, right? Like, how do I sort through this as an employee? How do you talk about the difference between the two? Because now you've sold me. I'm in, but now you've also got further down the page, I see you have values as well.
Yeah, I think values is, how are you internally? How are you as a person? What do you value as a person? And then the operating principles are, how do you deliver? More than likely. So the values like sustainability, collaboration, impact, and equality. So, those all carry massive amounts of weight, and those are all on the job description. So, coming in exactly what you're getting into. Another thing that I think has been a nice pivot for us in the last couple of years is we include kind of what your first 90 days looks like in the job description. So people are really tuned in when they come aboard. They know exactly what they're getting into.
Heads up, eyes open.
Yeah. I do love that.
That's great. That's cool. All right, cool. So you told us about a terrible experience that you had, but I also want to hear about a win. You have a great onboarding. You're telling us all these things. Is there some experience that you went through where you're like, that is how I'm going to do it from now on, or this is the tidbit that has informed my approach? I
can take a negative maybe and spin it into a positive.
Whatever you want. Tell us it all.
I had the experience of working for a company that got acquired. And it was right at the holidays. And that can be really hard.
I already know that is hard.
It's tough. Everyone's looking at each other going, what are we doing?
What's going to happen now?
Everyone's scared. People have families, people are dependent on the insurance. And when we started the process, which again was like right at the holidays, and it was already super tense. And there was no transition plan. There was nothing planned. There was no benefits discussion. There was nobody talking about like, where does your role map to the role here? So people were just like added terror on top of terror. And I realized like, this is where my skill set works really well. So I'm really protective of all these people over here. I want to know what's going on over here. Tell me everything, and then get the people to where they need to be. So I felt like I came into that with the timid, trepidation that everybody else had, and came out of it with like, we're going to make it. We're going to be just fine. Like, we've got each other's backs still. I know that, that decision for our company to sell was probably really difficult, and it was intended to keep an amazing team together. And I kept that in mind going forward. So, we were able to keep most everybody together, but lost a couple good people in that transition, as you will.
Yeah,
I realized like I have this is where I thrive, this particular spot right here. So I was able to kind of dig in there and you know, save some people, and a lot of people are still there doing great work.
That's amazing. Yeah, that merger acquisition moment is the lack of information, right? So everything is changing. And so everything is on the table. And so I'd like to know as an employee, everything, like it's almost impossible to share that much information. But if you share nothing, then everybody's like, wow, you know, you're going to get zero engagement, zero productivity. Everybody's freaking out. So it is a challenging problem. Culture is one of the, and I've written about this, culture is one of the biggest overlooked gaps, opportunities in an M&A moment, right? Like that it's just not seen. And I wish it were. I have worked with and have been lucky enough to get called in to help with some of those. And it's great. It was someone who really understood that was important, because it would have gone poorly if we hadn't worked on that. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for that. Any other final stories or thoughts that you'd like to share that you've learned through your time being a non-culture professional?
Well, I think I mentioned I'm getting ready to start an MBA, so I'm reading a boatload of books right now that have nothing to do with work, business really. But one of them is, I think I told you about the bee book. Did I tell you about the bee book?
I don't think I heard
So
about
it's called, I got inspired by somebody's story about this bee swarming through their yard and looked up this book, and the woman that wrote it is here in Vancouver, and it's called The Song of Increase. And it's telling about this moment. I mean, the book is about beekeeping, but it's the story of, or the process of, when the bees coming out of spring are starting to build their hive and build for the spring, and they're, you know, building their hive, and they're building their comb and everything to make the honey for the winter. They start to evolve almost, and like they start to become so big that some of them have to leave, and they'll take their queen and all their most experienced bees, and they will leave. And in the moment right before that happens, and all this is known, this is all innate, and they've all been born for 1,000 years, they all just have this information, this data in their mind. And right before they leave, it's moments, and the song that she calls the Song of Increase, it's the song of the swarm as they're about to leave. And it's like, what could we possibly do to have that much knowledge between us? And I think I was thinking about it in terms of culture, like we have an opportunity, if we're sharing information in the right way, and that it's just sort of like passed along without even having to do anything to pass it along, that would be the dream. So the idea that, in fact, there's a follow-up book, like I said, I've been reading a lot, by Seth Godin, who, his book is called The Song of Significance, and it's similar, and but he talks about it in the landscape of work and profession, and he says basically that the honey is a byproduct of a healthy hive. And I think for work, I mean, what more could you ask for? So but yeah, other than that, that was just something that's been on my mind. I've been preaching bees to everybody lately for some reason.
Well, I think we know the reason. That's really profound. And yes, the honey is the result. And one of the things that I have said is, you know, profit is just proof of the work that you're doing. And you don't want to shortcut that. Because if you shortcut it, then it's not sustainable. And that's I think the most important part, right? Like that's we've kind of bastardized capitalism in that way, right? Like capitalism's great for efficiency, but when you skip over the how, it becomes problematic. And so that's what we really want to go back to, kind of that value creation, as opposed to what are people gonna, how can I get people to give me money?
Yeah, we need another episode for that.
Yeah, we do need another episode for that. Awesome. Morgan Garritson, Director of Digital Operations at Persefoni. You can learn about Persefoni's work at persefoni.com, Persefoni.com. thank you so much for coming on Great Mondays Radio. It was a real pleasure to get to talk to you.
You bet. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.